And anyone who has a Ukrainian flag in their bio is a retard. You're virtue signaling about something you don't know shit about. You just want people to think that you're politically aware and woke. Just a mind slave. It's obvious by now we're in a full-on proxy war with Russia. Hey guys, thanks for joining me on Dima Talks. I'm your host, Dima. I do want to be somewhat careful about the way I lay out this topic. I have people in my family and the Ukrainian community that will, without a doubt, despise what I'm gonna say. But I've never been the best at avoiding conflict, especially not with people that avoid reality altogether. So I'm gonna say what I know to be true. I do want to preface this by saying that I love my people. I have a deep respect for my culture, the place that I was born. I mean, I got a trident tattoo and everything. I hate that young men are dying over there every day, but I'm not gonna let the media hijack my emotions and dictate to me what I'm gonna think about the situation. The Western media is lying to you about everything.
And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
I don't know how that isn't common knowledge by now. Its sole purpose is to program the narrative into you bots. I really don't understand how everybody doesn't see that. The last thing I want to do is drone on and on about the 30 years leading up to the war. I'm no historian, so I'm just going to stay in my lane and I'm going to expose some of the most obvious bullshit narratives that the majority of you are just eating right up. The reason the US and NATO are supplying Ukraine with weapons is not because we're interested in freedom for an innocent little country that loves democracy. Number one, our government doesn't give a shit about freedom. They care about power and dollar bills. The military-industrial complex looks at the situation in Ukraine like a gold mine. Washington looks at it like just a way to weaken Russia. But what do I know? I'm just some random dude on the internet, right?
Нам зараз надавали стільки зброї, не тому, що ми хороші, як нам кажуть, нам допомагає Захід, бо вони хочуть нам блага, тому що ми виконуємо задачі Заходу. Тому що ми єдині, хто готові їх виконувати, бо нам весело, нам прикольно убивати і прикольно воювати. І вони думають, вау, давайте вже подивимося, що це буде. Ми тут флагман, тому що ми затіяли війну, якої не було вже останніх 60 років. Так от.
Okay, so this guy's name is Yevgeny Karas. He's the leader of the neo-Nazi group C-14. He was actually hired by the mayor of Kiev to enforce order and help fight Russians. He's one of the few idiots with a low enough IQ to just openly say that the US and the military-industrial complex look at US like an investment. We'll get back to dumbass neo-Nazi Yevgeny in just a minute. Okay, and number two, Ukraine is not an innocent little country that would be flourishing if it wasn't for Russia. Every institution in Ukraine is completely corrupted from the inside out. Everyone from Ukraine knows that anybody can be paid off. The whole narrative of Ukraine not being able to get out from under Russia's grasp to be a non-corrupt country is total bullshit. I was told since I was a child that everything was corrupted because of communism. Everybody had to work around the system, so the corruption's kind of embedded into everybody. The oligarchs are basically the lobbyists in Ukraine. Literally everything is bought, from the courts to the banks, and yes, even politicians. It's basically embedded into every person and every system out of the old Soviet Union. And it would take decades, if not centuries, to root it all out. There are so many different examples of Ukraine selling their soul to different administrations, different countries. I'll leave a link down in the description to some of the big ones, like the Biden scandal, some of the big bank bailouts. That's why they haven't prospered or excelled in any way for the past 30 years. If the Ukrainian leadership was doing their jobs, they had plenty of time and plenty of resources to have built up their economy. They're in the gutter, just like they were after the fall of the Soviet Union. Every single president they've ever had abused the opportunity to completely rob their people. I mean, Yanukovych literally had a golden toilet. I've been hearing a lot about how all of them were actually Russian presidents planted there to further Russian interests. I mean, you just have to Google it. They're literally all born in Ukraine. They're just corrupt. It shows how everything's just been politicized. If you have pro-Russian sentiments, you're a Russian, and if you have pro-Ukrainian sentiments, you're a Ukrainian. Which leads me to my next point. Guys, trust me, there are plenty of Nazis in Ukraine. Pretty much every Ukrainian that I went to church or Russian school with was taught that Us and Russians were the same people. I speak both Russian and Ukrainian. I have family on both sides. I remember when I was little and my parents were asked where they were from, they would just say Russian not to confuse people, and why did it matter anyway? It was the same thing. I don't know if people realize, but all Slavic people come from Kiev originally. It's one spread out group of people that have been under unified government for hundreds of years. There were always small groups of people that were overly hung up on us having a separate identity. A lot of these small groups are literal Nazi organizations. Not the kind of Nazi a blue-haired chick with a septum piercing accuses you of being. The real kind. The media is trying to tell you that Ukraine has no Nazis and it's all just Russian propaganda. Another lie. All it takes is a quick search to see that that isn't true. Ukraine has had a strong Nazi presence since the 1930s. Reuters actually did a piece on how bad it was just to backtrack a few years later when the Russia conflict started. You can hear it straight from the horse's mouth. Let's listen to our boy Yevgeny.
Націоналістичні ідеї. Націоналісти якби були там ключовим фактором однозначно і на фронті. Зараз дуже багато є спекуляцій. Ну, нациків вже ж було небагато, там, ну, ЛГБТшники, там, посольства кажуть, ну, скільки там було там нациків? Ну, нациків там було там 10% там, ну, запаяних ідейних. Ну, це ж питання в тому, це може так казати лише Йов, який не був на війні, не знає, наскільки оцих от 10%, хоча там навіть може даже менше було, я думаю, націоналістів було хай там даже 8%, ну, наскільки це в пропорції ефективності впливу, наскільки це складало просто галопуючи безкінечну цих 8%, бо ефективність упала на 90%. То впливові, не було б націоналістів, все би це от пошло би сразу на гей-парад.
I do want to quickly mention a man named Stepan Bandera. It's a good example to show how deep the Nazi ideologies kind of permeated in Ukraine. He was always sold to us as kind of like a folk hero. I remember hearing a few bad things about him when I was little, but he was always like portrayed in a very good light. And when I got older, I looked into him and researched him, and turns out he was allied with the Nazi forces during World War II. And apparently he did save a lot of Ukrainian lives with that alliance, which good for those people. But I find it really interesting that this dude is like a folk hero in Ukraine, to this day even. The last thing I want to do is paint my people in a bad light, or make it seem like I'm glorifying the Russian invasion, but it's not that black and white of an issue at all, especially not to some 19-year-old retard. I view the conflict in Ukraine like a domestic abuse situation that spilled over between Russia and Ukraine. NATO is like the white knight coming to save the day, but they have ulterior motives. We should have stayed out of the conflict over there. Maybe it would have been over by now. And anyone who has a Ukrainian flag in their bio is a retard. You're virtue signaling about something you don't know shit about. You just want people to think that you're politically aware and woke. Just a mind slave. It's obvious by now we're in a full-on proxy war with Russia. The US just does whatever the fuck they want to do on the world stage and just give us a narrative that we'll be willing to eat up. The proxy and sanction war they're doing in Ukraine is nothing new. Although it is backfiring, I believe, which is a topic for another video. You remember what they did in Guatemala, Libya, Iraq, Vietnam? Russia's the new boogeyman, purely evil in every way. I view the military-industrial complex as evil. I view the Western woke media as evil. They don't want child sex change and other woke shit in Russia. Why shouldn't they protect the security of their country's ideologies and beliefs? We would, right? We would protect them at all costs. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Do you really believe we're supplying Ukraine with weapons because we care about freedom? Or does it make more sense that the US would use this opportunity to weaken and destroy another world power using Ukraine's army? Russia's warned us about encroaching on Ukraine for decades. I mean, doesn't it make sense? How would the US react if Mexico joined a military alliance with Russia, in an alliance whose sole purpose was to attack America? Because that's what NATO is, you know that, right? It was created for the sole purpose of attacking and defending from Russia. Am I saying that Russia entering Ukraine was the right thing to do? I don't know. But what I do know is the West is fueling this conflict with our tax dollar and thousands of lives. And if you're pushing the narrative that we need to send more weapons to Ukraine, you're implicit. I have a deep respect for any man that's willing to put down his life for his beliefs and his family. I truly look at people on the both sides of this war as brothers. Use your critical thinking skills. You don't need the corporations to think for you. Read a book, watch a documentary before you support a war you know nothing about. Especially when we know how soulless and demonic the US military machine and media is. It's now or never, guys. We need to start thinking for ourselves. We live in the information age. It's time to take our minds back. It's very likely that this video gets taken down, so please share it, guys, especially with any dummies who support military aid to Ukraine. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and thanks for joining me on Dima Talks.